Dr. Giard, thank you for the generous introduction. I will risk embarrassing you a little later on in these slides, so I apologize in advance. I am going to use a brief quote from you when I'm talking about the American Tinnitus Association, which I'm proud to represent here today. The American Tinnitus Association. Oh, by the way, Robin did just mention I'm a recovering attorney, meaning I have a lot of letters there underneath my name. None of them are PhD or MD, so forgive me. I'm playing the patient advocate role here, representing the American Tinnitus Association, but it's very relevant to this group. And if you'll indulge me, I'll give you a 5-minute overview of what the ATA is and where we come from, and also my own personal background, which ties directly to the founding of the ATA itself, but most importantly, why it matters to this group. In 1971, there was a researcher, many of you probably know the name at the very least, if not have had some kind of interaction with him or someone who's worked with him, a gentleman by the name of Jack Vernon. Jack Vernon was out of Oregon, and in 1971 happened to be one of the few researchers at the time focusing on tinnitus. And there was a patient in the United States who was struggling deeply with tinnitus, and this is pre-Google, obviously pre-AOL, pre any internet. And this individual, Charles, ended up at the NIH looking through physical records of any researcher anywhere in the United States who might be focused on tinnitus. He came across Jack's name. Very, very long story short, they had sort of a eureka moment sitting in front of a water fountain where Jack and Charles realized the background noise from the water fountain was soothing to Charles's tinnitus. That led, an oversimplification, but that led to them wanting to share a newsletter about Jack's research and some findings similar to this. That turned into folks sending in whatever they could a month to receive a newsletter about the latest information on tinnitus. And hence the ATA was born. It was born out of the relationship between a suffering patient and a researcher who had some information that he wanted to get out there. 55 years later, the ATA is still here. Jack often would say he doesn't ever want a patient to hear, learn to live with it. And unfortunately, we know that patients today are still being told, learn to live with it, myself included. When I was 18 years old, a very longer story shorter, when I was 18 years old, a senior in high school, I was diagnosed with cancer a second time. And in the middle of my senior year of high school, I needed a bone marrow transplant. And if I found a donor and if the transplant happened, I had a 50-50 shot at survival. Obviously, I'm still here to share that story. Things went very well. I'm very thankful to the incredible medical teams that saved my life. But through the course of that second bout with cancer, I had total body irradiation, localized radiation, spinal taps, bone marrow aspirate, all sorts of fun stuff, ototoxic chemo. And woke up one morning from a spinal tap with this awful ringing in my ears. And I happened to be at a cancer facility that had specialists for every side effect of every treatment I had going on. This was in 1998 in Seattle. And I ended up seeing an audiologist who worked specifically with the oncologists, who did an audiogram, did a few other screenings with me, and told me, listen, you have something called, back then I was calling it tinnitus. I didn't know the tinnitus distinction. But she said, you have tinnitus and you're going to have to learn to live with it. So that was 25 years later, after Jack Vernon had founded the ATA, that I was, as a patient, as a teenager, being told for the rest of my life I'd have to live with this thing. Tried not to think much about it over the ensuing decades until I got a phone call about this organization called the American Tinnitus Association, that exists to eliminate this phrase, learn to live with it. And I was shocked to learn that today patients are being told what I was told 20 years ago and what Jack knew was being told to patients 50 years ago. And so we are proud to be the only charity in the United States focused exclusively, the longest serving charity in the United States focused exclusively to dealing with tinnitus. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And I share that personal piece of my story to let you know I come to this role as a patient advocate. We are a patient advocate organization, and I'm proud to serve as a CEO who literally has the condition that we're looking to treat. This number is debated amongst circles much more intelligent than myself, but the general number we've been using recently has been that in America, over 50 million Americans have some version of tinnitus. That's an incredible number when you think about the folks who are affected. Now we know there are variations in the severity of the tinnitus, but imagine if each of those Americans gave $1 to research a year. That's $50 million a year in research available for incredible work that everyone on this call is interested in doing and pursuing and continuing. We exist to support three different areas. Support for both patients and providers, education, again, of both patients and providers, and of course, research, the focus of everyone on this call. And ever since Jack's founding in 1971, those have been the three buckets that we're extremely focused on as an organization. For over 50 years, we've been involved in all three of those things. I've been on board for about a year and a half, and I'm proud to share that in the last calendar year alone, we funded nearly $1 million in research. Now, many of these were seed grants, but we're very, very proud of the diversity and the cash that we've been able to fund in this area, especially with recent discourse about sort of an uncertainty about where larger sources of funding may come from. We've been at this for coming up on 55 years. So we have a long and trusted relationship with our members, with our donors, and with the scientific community that we're very, very proud of. Also, for those of you outside of the U.S., you may have heard of Yelp for restaurant reviews. In the U.S., there's something like Yelp called Charity Navigator that rates nonprofits, and whether donors need to think of nonprofits as an investment. And you wouldn't buy a stock on the stock market for a business that wasn't being run well. The same is true for a nonprofit, which is still a business and an organization, and so needs to be run well. So there are third-party organizations that vet nonprofits, and I'm proud to say that recently we were rated a 4 out of 4 star charity by Charity Navigator. That's a new rating, and that's something we worked very hard for, and we're very, very proud of. And not many nonprofits in the United States can claim that distinction. More importantly, that $1 million in research I mentioned, we had 2 funding rounds since I've joined the ATA in the last year and a half. The most recent round, and forgive me because I'm not the scientist on this call, but to give an idea of the grants we funded in the last year, they range anywhere from pediatric focus and technology that virtual reality can help with tinnitus, with Dr. Chan's work. We have a younger researcher who's working on an online tinnitus risk quiz to determine whether you are at risk factor for exposing yourself to potential tinnitus down the line, to biomarker work. Many of you probably recognize some of the names on this screen. If I had the names on the screen from last year's funding, and Robin, this is where I might embarrass you just slightly. I was with Robin at a research conference in Korea earlier this year. Robin was a recipient of one of our grants last summer, focusing on sleep and tinnitus. And it's a fascinating study, fascinating work. Robin and I have gotten to know each other well over the last year. But Robin said something in passing that meant a lot to me, who is dedicated to this cause. And we look at these numbers, especially as researchers, and we might think to ourselves, gosh, we need translational research. We need bench to bedside. We need multi-million-dollar grants. And this is true. But I think it's important for us to recognize how every little bit helps. And Robin, sort of in passing, shared with me that his grant that he received from the ATA was quote, life-saving to his research, given the time and some of the things he was going through at the time, trying to keep his project going. So even what we might consider from the outside to be a small or insignificant grant can be life-saving to the researcher themselves. So we're very, very proud that at every single level, we try to move the needle forward. That's great. Where are we headed? And so this is where you all can come in, actually. So as a public charity, the first thing I like to share with folks is it's pretty simple. We cannot give what we do not have. And so we have a double-sided mission. One is to raise awareness and funding for tinnitus so that the next generation of researchers, A, become interested in tinnitus, but B, can afford to do that. Over the next 5 years, we have goals to strengthen what we're already doing well. We have something called the Tinnitus Advisors Program. It's basically our 1-800 hotline for tinnitus patients or folks who have questions. We want to strengthen that program. We want to strengthen awareness and prevention of tinnitus. So that's simply online presence, digital presence. We have a magazine that comes out 3 times a year. We want to continue that. I've mentioned this a couple times already, strengthening our fundraising, not because we want more money for the sake of having money, but literally because all of these great ideas that we want to pursue, the ideas that folks have, the critiques that people have on how we can do better, all of it obviously requires resources. So encouraging everyone to invest in our vision and the shared vision of beating this thing is something that's going to be a priority of ours, creating a culture of philanthropy, I call it. And then most importantly, and relevant to this call, as a result of strengthening our fundraising, what we really need to do is strengthen our research funding. So we recognize that our seed grants have had an impact, but looking down the line, if we could wave a magic wand, gosh, would we love to hand out multi-million-dollar grants every year. So that is something we're going to strive for as we also look at the focus and intent of our research going forward. We have an incredible board of directors that continues to evolve. Recently, Dan Polly, whose name was mentioned earlier on this call, joined our board of directors. And he, along with Mark Fagelson, who runs our scientific advisory committee, are very, very interested in evolving our research programming so that it continues to address the needs of folks like those on this call. Some ideas that we're bantering around for the next few years, and I'll just go through these very quickly. These are just examples of things that we're talking about quietly, but we want to increase our education for providers. Providers need to know what the latest is from calls like today. What's the latest research? What is this bimodal or multimodal research that we're hearing about? What's the latest on CBT? It's our job to make sure that the front lines who are dealing with our patients and the folks suffering from tinnitus have the latest information. That's where the ATA can help. We're looking at creating something similar to, we have our scientific advisory committee that works on awarding our research grants. We want to make a version of that for tinnitus. Everything from programming to basic statements to that provider education program, creating a group in addition to our actual board of directors that has a wide array of experts that try to help us find consensus as we move into the future. And even potentially, maybe hypothetically one day, actual tinnitus centers of excellence, not just a clinic, not just an education center, and not just a research center. But imagine in blue sky, if we had $1 trillion, what we could do if we had a physical place to bring all of these efforts together, how exciting that would be. That's what the ATA is here for. So how do we make that possible? And I've hinted to this a couple of times. One is bringing us together. So we're very, very proud to be the hosts of the United States version of TRI coming up in 2027. So I would be remiss not to share that date and ask you all to consider reserving those dates now. We'll be hosting the Tinnitus Research Initiative Conference in 2 years in Washington, D.C. We're very, very excited about partnering with TRI for that. But more importantly is in philanthropy. And again, there's folks on this call much smarter than me, so you probably all understand the Greek and Latin origin of the word philanthropy. But for those of you who haven't heard this, I'd like to break it down. Philanthropy is actually the combination of philos and anthropos. Philos, overly simplified, can be interpreted today as love, and anthropos is man or humankind. You put those together and you have a love of humankind. So we like to talk about transitioning to a culture of philanthropy at the ATA, meaning it's beyond I give you $50 and you give me X, or I give you $1,000 and you give me a tax write-off. It's much more about the love of this community. The patients desperately need our help. I'm one of them. The researchers that I share, which I share with our patients, desperately need our help because we need more funding for the work you all are talking about. And the providers need more help in terms of education and understanding what the latest is in treatments. And the ATA sits at that intersection, but it's only possible as the result of what folks give. And so I usually close talks like this by quoting President John Kennedy, who often, didn't often, said in his inaugural speech and is often quoted as having said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. I like to think of tinnitus the same way. We all have an opinion on that research is not worth it. This research needs more money. That treatment is no good. This treatment is better. That definition. We all have an opinion on where we need to go forward. I would challenge all of us to think to ourselves, what can we do to help today? And I would humbly implore you, if not the ATA, any number of the charities that are dedicated to tinnitus are worthy of your support, because if you're part of the solution, you can invest in it as well. And even $1 matters. So if you have a vested interest in tinnitus, if you have a vested interest in the future of research, we would welcome you to join me. I'm a proud donor of as many tinnitus charities as I can identify. I would invite you to join me in considering giving even $1, because that dollar funds the upcoming round of research we'll be funding. It funds the next call we get on our 1-800 line. And it funds, hypothetically, the next Dr. Robin Guillard focusing on sleep and intermittent tinnitus. So with that, I'll stop sharing the screen. I want to thank you all for your support. ATA.org if you ever need more information. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and we're trying to increase all of our socials. But we are here to serve, and I hope that wasn't too high level for you, Dr. Guillard. But thank you, everyone, for the time.